Welcome, everybody, to the Party of Two podcast. I am one of your hosts, the Internet's Andrea Donica.
And I'm your other host, the Internet's Mark B. Donica.
And today, we are searching desperately for imagination. Where is it? Where has it gone? Can we revive it for EPCOT for the future of Future World?
Personally, there's nothing going on up in my head imagination-wise.
No.
So, yeah.
Don't belittle yourself like that.
If there's only some sort of scan that can analyze my imagination.
What a wondrous piece of technology that would be.
If only.
If only. Ugh. We are talking about, of course, the Imagination Pavilion at EPCOT that has been in kind of a sad state of affairs for over 20 years now, and what was supposed to be 2 temporary replacements have gone on for longer than the original journey into imagination in EPCOT.
Or longer than anybody wanted them to be there.
Yeah. And with EPCOT getting all of these updates and changes, and with Disney's D23 Expo coming up in August, everybody can feel it in the air that there's going to be some sort of an announcement for changes happening to the pavilion. It's one of those things that Disney has put on the back burner for a long time. And now with all these changes for Disney World's big 50th anniversary coming up, it's time. And today we're going to talk about what we loved from the past, what we haven't loved so much, and primarily what we want to see happen within this entire pavilion as a whole coming to the future.
Especially because the future world. Because there have already been certain announcements for other changes of EPCOT and other updates for the park, and it's sort of whittling down what space is available and what announcement will be big enough to fill D23. I mean, D23, it's full of superfans, so you could announce that a churro cart is getting a refurbishment, and people will be pretty stoked about it.
Well, let's not go too far.
Not that it's the headline announcement.
Okay,
not
but
saying that
seriously,
that's
if Chapek went onto the stage and started talking about refurbishment of churros, there would be crickets in the audience.
I don't know. No, because people, like...
You don't want to mess with the tried and true formula.
But you open, that's an opener. That's a strong opener. And with how much money they've been pouring into churros, think about at Disneyland proper, There's so much. But, and of course, there's just such a big opportunity for merchandising. You know, I'm taking a joke way too far. But it's one of those things where people are excited to be in the room. And whatever they announce, there will be at least several people that are ridiculously hyped. Could be their first D23, could be their first time they make it into the parks. Panel, like, whatever. There's a lot of hype to be had, and it would behoove them to take advantage of that hype by announcing something awesome along the lines of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge.
Definitely. So, let's start with what imagination means, what we perceive it to mean, what it means to the hearts of young and old. The definition of imagination is the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. I think Dreamfinder says it much more interestingly. One little spark of inspiration is at the heart of all creation. Right at the start of everything that's new, one little spark lights up for you. What does imagination mean to you, Mark?
For me, it's sort of a mixture of both of those things. I think without some sort of stimuli, you can't have a basis for expounding past your limits. I think that's ultimately what it is expounding past the limits of any sort of sensory intake. So seeing something beyond what it could be, hearing something that you've never heard before. And like I don't mean that to say that it's reliant on the senses, but there are, like, I think it's much, in terms of imagination, I think people with some sort of sensory deficiency have a much stronger workout when it comes to imagination, because there's certain stuff that they don't know. You know, blind people don't know what things look like and what colors are, but they can smell it, and they can really make it whatever they want to be. They're not burdened with sight
Yeah.
when it comes to, oh, that looks so plain, but it smells so great, or whatever. But it's sort of, to me, it's pushing the limits of possibility, whether that's very minute and just wishing that, or like just thinking of a better book title for something, or seeing a color and going, what in the natural world did somebody see and go, how that hasn't been documented yet, or what you know. I think I'm going a little bit too far, but yes.
Well, not necessarily. Something that has always struck me is, for example, the color for the Imagination Pavilion. It's this really brilliant, luminescent fuchsia pink. And, you know, you take a step back and you go, okay, well, where do I really see that in nature, for example? And you don't see that a lot. You might see it in a really vivid sunset, for example, or, you know, something with a lot of color depth. And I think that that's almost the perfect color for the pavilion, because it's like, oh yeah, you know, this isn't my typical green or brown for dirt, something from the earth. This is something really, really vivid, almost looking to the sky through a rainbow.
Well, it's either magenta or fuchsia that is a man-made color. That is not a color that has existed in, like, nobody saw a flower that was magenta and went, oh, like there is a there's it like, now that you can get precise, you know, with computers and this and that, that dated me, but one of those two colors was made by putting the right amount of this color and the right amount of that color together to make a new color. So that color was imagined. So it was something where people went, oh, I like that color, but what if it had a little more red in it? What if it had a little more violet in it, or something? Because it's either, because with magenta or fuchsia, it's either a little more red or a little more purple, and I can't recall, but it's one of those two. But it's just that, I say simple, but it's just that simple of going, looking in your coloring book and you see pink down there and you're like, well, what if I made a little bit more purple? That, I've never seen that color. Like, we're getting so much farther away from those types of discoveries, and it can be that simple, or it can be as complex as taking two compounds that don't exist anywhere near each other in nature, like something from the bottom of the sea and something from the ocean, and making something with that, or not the ocean, the sky, excuse me, the bottom of the sea and the sky, bringing it together and being like, we just made something new, because we can't, like, we wanted to, what would it be like if we brought these two things together, and we imagined it and it came together and it's real. So the coloration also, it's such a unique, like, for Disney especially, having the figment colors be sort of the main, I don't, like, there's just something about that color combination that you don't see very often too.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see the yellow, the orange, and the purple and the fuchsia together in any, like, it's so unique. Like, seeing any of the merchandise, like the pin thing that's just the 4 Imagination Pavilion colors, is just like, what it's so, like, it's weird to think that you don't see that very often, and the best place to acknowledge all of that is the Imagination Pavilion.
Very well said. Very well said.
I mean, I could have probably said it better.
Maybe. So, the creation of the Imagination Pavilion was really kind of thrown together a little bit, just with Disney going through different sponsorships to build Future World. And when Kodak came in, all they said when they signed the papers was, just do something imaginative, which is great to say to Imagineering. So Tony Baxter, who took multiple different attraction concepts, even whole lands that he had put together, and even some original concept ideas for the land that he was building, but then had to jump over to different projects.
The land pavilion.
Yes.
Yeah, not like, because he was building the land of, like, the Frontierland expansion could be.
Yeah. Taking all of these different concepts together, he was able to kind of do something massively creative. And we get this beautiful 2-pyramid glass, really shimmering, really inspiring building to come to the Imagination Pavilion, and 2 floors of a lot of fun things to do and see, and also a small theater on the side with a movie about imagination. And that's a lot. That's a lot for an area, which is great. It's not exactly in that same state anymore. We now have the 2nd floor, which was ruled by OSHA to not be up to code for safety. So now what's really just the waiting lobby area of what once was the former attraction ImageWorks is now a DVC lobby area.
DVC, Disney Vacation Club.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. But all of the other pieces are actually still kind of just sitting there in the back. It's just walled off. And we've also heard a rumor, and I'm going to say that I think that this is true, which is why I'm bringing it up in the first place, is that the original Rainbow Tunnel is going to come back into the Odyssey restaurant type pavilion place that EPCOT has been using as a building of sorts for special events and festivals, etc., for people to come and experience it. I fully believe that it is going to be coming back just because things had been sitting there for so long, and it's something relatively easy for them to do. They just clean it up and they move it piece by piece to a new spot, and the Instagrammers are going to go crazy over it. You know, it's these are little things, and building them up all together creates a lot of hope for other old things coming back. What we currently have for Journey into Your Imagination with Figment, say that 5 times fast.
Or is it Journeying into Imagination with Figment?
Oh, you know what? I think you're right.
Yeah.
No, I think the Your is still there.
I
don't know, whatever.
The current incarnation of the imagination, right?
I prefer just Journey into Imagination. I prefer seeing Dreamfinder in there. I like Eric Idle. I do. But I think with what we currently have, it kind of became an issue of after people hating the redo so much, after Disney having paid such a big name to actually film all of this stuff and then get rid of it after 2 years. It's like, now we can't just burn bridges and waste this money, and also we don't want to hurt Eric Idle's feelings.
Well, that's not as important. Like but
I mean, from a business standpoint, it is, especially when you're working with celebrities.
Yeah,
I think
when it comes to the current state of the ride, looking at it objectively, if you don't have any of the prism of what came before, still not great. When it comes to imagination, it's a very boring ride. If it's about imagination, it's just like we're going to test your senses. It's a very boring ride. The newer incarnation of the ride it's I would say confusing if you had people who just came in and saw the journey into your imagination. I recognize this guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, and you know, so the inclusion of him to bring that story together of the Imagination Institute, I think was smart. Instead of bringing in a completely third party, let's connect these attractions, let's connect this story, and let's make it all work. Then when it falls apart is all of it. But his I think Eric Idle's contributions for it's similar thing to actors that are in bad movies. The actors can only do what they can with what they're given. And for what he was given, he jumped in whole hog.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Like, oh, you're gonna paint my face up like the moon, like the that old French movie. Yeah, let's go. And he I mean, given his past, he's not afraid to make a fool of himself. That's part of, I would imagine, part of the reason why they cast him as sort of the blubbery executive for this place. So his involvement, I feel sorry for him. If the ride does evolve, and that's the thing, is I don't want the exact ride back, because I think that's a disservice to Imagineering. That's a disservice to any future fans. I think you take the concept of the motes of imagine, or like the what is it? The sparks of imagination and his thing, the dream find, like the
dream catcher.
The dream catcher. Yes, thank you. Guess who did research? But you take all of that and you present it in a new way, new technology, top of the line audio animatronics. And honestly, if they could figure out a way to include Eric Idle in it again, I think that would be nice.
I think so too.
Like not necessarily, like I still think you could have, I mean, well, no, because Honey, I Shrunk the Audience is done. So his involvement at all as Nigel Channing anyway is now exclusive to Journey into Imagination. So I wonder if you could have some sort of a fake out still where you are coming to this open house, and it's not as cacophonous, but it's something akin to, instead of it's not just an interruption, because the concept of utilize, like I said with my definition of imagination, utilizing the senses to enhance what can be seen or heard or smelled or whatever, I think there's definitely something to that. So by maintaining the facade of we're going to stretch your senses, cool, let's do that with art, let's do that with science, let's do that with performance, let's do that with all of this. So I think it's sort of, what's a good ride that does it? Men in Black Alien Attack does it, where you come in, like, you know what the story is going to be, but there's this pretense and this presentation that adds to the world building. And so I think you have an Imagination Institute that hasn't seen that much play. You know, you play into the story of people don't come here anymore. You play into all of that, and it is that little spark that brings Dreamfinder back. Like it tells the story of, as sort of, it's almost like a Christmas movie, kind of, where it's like, if you believe enough, Santa will come. You know, something like that.
You're gonna make me cry.
But something like that, where like play on the fact that we have everything at our fingertips. We have. You don't have to imagine what it's like traveling to China, because you can look it up on Google Maps.
This is true.
You don't you don't have to imagine anymore. And so playing into that story of, you do it, like what's stopping you? That's the thing that can push the limits of imagination, is now that are the basis of knowledge for all of humanity is now being constantly pushed to its limits, where now we're getting all of these micro discoveries, and now we have to journey outward. It's prime for just go for it. like now you have all of this information, take it, and if anything, now you can imagine further. And so I think utilizing the Imagination Institute for that would be nice ultimately. But you still have this top of the line dark ride with Dreamfinder and Figment being the focus. And I'm not saying we get an animatronic Nigel Channing, but do something that transitions from the current presentation to a nostalgic presentation, not the same presentation, but a nostalgic presentation where it's something where it, like, they're on the right track. I think the beats of the beats, not the substance of the current ride, works barely. like I'm going off of an outline here of,
well, sure, like things can look good on paper, but then with execution it can just not be good.
Yeah. So like one of the things that we went on it recently in the sound lab, we're just in a bog standard recording studio.
Yeah.
Now it would take away a little bit from the effect at the end where you're watching a screen and then boom, all of a sudden you're in this big thing with all of these figments. But if it blacks out so that you hear the train, you hear the blah, 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 you hear all of the stuff that's happening. While that's happening, you have a transition where you start to see sound, like an old World of Color special where it's, and there are ways to push what they have done into such a bigger stratosphere. And the problem is they just didn't have the money to do it.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate when it really does all come down to money. Kodak didn't want to put up the money. Well, they couldn't afford to do it because they just weren't doing well, and Disney wasn't doing well either. With what happened with Euro Disney, suddenly they were making all of these huge cost-cutting measures. It's everything that we saw in the 90s that kind of became a disaster for all of the theme parks.
Yeah, I mean, and now I can imagine the straight to VHS sequels being a way to try to recoup those losses by like cutting the budget severely, not having to deal with the theaters and just going straight to home release. I'm understanding more of the business side, and it's giving me a little bit more sympathy, but not as much just because the quality wasn't there. Though I will say the Return of Jafar 40 Thieves soundtrack was one of my favorite CDs to listen to as a kid. And I found a digital version recently, and I bet I could sing all of those songs back to front.
I'm sure.
I adore it, but it's you never with everything in life, perception is everything. So when it comes to people who may have grown up on this, right? It's similar to kids that grew up on the prequels. That's Star Wars to them. So when people show up to the Imagination Institute and see this version of Figment and Nigel, that's what Journey into Imagination is to them, and with the internet you can go back and watch the older stuff, but that may not translate to you.
That's interesting though, because any time that Disney has released, say, any Dreamfinder merchandise, or if he's made an appearance at like D23, for example, people go nuts over that stuff. Only a couple of years ago, they released or maybe, I don't even know if it has been 2 years yet. They had a Zoom set of Dreamfinder and the Dreamcatcher with Figment, and it sold out immediately.
Sure, but who has money? Kids? Teenagers?
Their parents do.
Yeah, their parents do. So that's
the parents are also nostalgic for that. They remember Epcot, and now that everybody has YouTube and all of these different ways of living through the past, they're able to share that with their kids. And there are plenty of young people like us. We didn't get to experience the original Journey into Imagination, but we're able to see all of the media that has been saved of it, and we can both go, yeah, this was way better. This was amazing. And how dare they chop out 35 to 40 something % of the attraction for putting a shell of an Imageworks and and of course a little gift shop for people to walk through.
So my ultimate issue isn't necessarily the defunct and Yesterworld people. They've done an amazing job in researching all of things and telling the story. And the one thing that I pull from that is, yes, Eisner is at fault for all of the stuff that he was trying to push. Euro Disney not being a success because of the cutbacks that they made for it. Yes, Kodak is at fault. Even though the market was changing, they couldn't uphold their part of a contract that they signed that Eisner was smart to include. This is such a complex issue where if Kodak had the money, they were contractually obligated to do that, and then Disney could have, boom. But the rise of digital caused Kodak not to do that, and that's not Kodak's fault because of the market. Just like how the failure of it's not that it was set up to fail, but all of their marketing and strategies and everything when it came to actually making a product that the French and European markets could go for, all of that research was done and not. And you look at it now, and Disneyland Paris is one of the, I mean, it's an amazing achievement in technology and storytelling when it comes to their version of Frontierland. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is something that we've talked about several times, and something that I could probably talk about at length, is the failure of the sponsor system.
Yeah.
When it comes to like Kitchen Cabaret or whatever, like the land was supposed to be a complete, like, without the land failing, we wouldn't have gotten Journey into Imagination. So that's one thing. But like, it's this chain reaction of stuff where now we are primed. Disney is stronger than it's ever been financially, I would say.
They're a mammoth. They're a behemoth.
They're a behemoth. They're a Leviathan, if you take Disney Sea into account. But it's they are poised to relaunch this brand in for a market that is starving for it. So while it may not, they had the intent to have that $350 to $500 million refurb, however many years ago it was. But now, where they own the media, with all of this nostalgia that they can take advantage of and do, if it isn't Journey into Imagination with Figment, people will love it. If it is a ride that has Figment and Dreamfinder on it, people are going to be clamoring for it, because they are very much in the power position where they can almost do anything that at least has those two criteria, and one little spark that has those three criteria, and people will say it's a landmark attraction, blah blah blah. But given their streak with how they've been utilizing technology over these past couple of years, they also, as long as it's not like something, because one of the biggest takeaways from Flight of Passage, which we finally got to go on recently,
yes,
was how it was Soarin'. It was Soarin' plus Back to the Future. And that's cool, and I had a great time, but I still had that it's like this and this. And that may just be me.
Well, no, and people are really split on that too, and that's something that we'll definitely talk about on another episode. But right now, when any theme park utilizes a certain type of ride technology, if they keep doing it over and over, people notice right away. And that's especially for anything screen-based. That's what so many theme parks are doing to save money. And the unfortunate thing is it shows, and the film, etc., all of the technology used for it does not hold up after a while. It needs to be cleaned. It needs to be almost like reshot, for example. It's why for Soarin', for example, they reshot everything, and then they do all of this CGI stuff to like enhance it. And then people don't like all of these enhancements, because then you get into the realm of, well, this looks too fake to me. Whereas the original Soarin' over California actually had all real footage, which people like because it looks more natural. It's just, unfortunately, the film has gotten old. If you don't maintain these things, they're not going to look as good.
And so here's another thing that I'm sorry if I'm taking over your talking points.
No. I want to see where this goes.
Okay.
This whole conversation should be imaginative.
It should be.
I shouldn't be able to pre-plan everything.
So here's the spectrum of where this ride is going to land. On one end, you have the Navi River journey, where there are a lot of screens with imaginative stuff, and there is some real elements. Like, for me personally, because it was night, I wasn't necessarily having a problem seeing how the effects were done. Like the little twirly gigs things, like you could see the strings coming down, but then you hit the animatronic at the end.
The shaman
of songs. Thank you. I had the of songs part. And so it's one of those things of, here's something that was never real, ever. Like the Na'vi were always a digital thing. There may have been busts made to help the animators, but this is the first real Na'vi that exists in our world. And that's crazy. That's nuts. That's remarkable. That's so imaginative, and the very short ride is worth it just to see the body measurements and oh my, how did they make that work? So taking that imaginative world and making it real, I would say on the other end of this, but still using screens to sort of display, okay, cool, here's some other imaginative stuff that in order to get stuff out, we post screens. Now on the other end of that spectrum, and this may surprise people, is the Cat in the Hat ride at Islands of Adventure, where you have the world of Dr. Seuss, which is so whimsical and imaginative, and by making everything real, I think it starts to lose the appeal of what made it so whimsical, because then you go, that's just to that, that's just to that, because that's just that, and again, this is the views expressed by those of the hosts only. But I think is the spectrum that they should be operating in, is Cat in the Hat on one end, Navi River Journey on the other, where they're both things that you like. If you pass a line, if you go a little bit too silly, a little too whimsical, maybe, there's still, Dreamfinder or Figment is a whimsical character.
Yes.
And a lot of the visuals that we see have whimsy to them, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be whimsy, but you go too whimsical and then you get into silly.
Well, that's also kind of the problem with the current iteration, because while Eric Idle is trying to play the straight man, he is also, he's also a goof. Like, the actual actor is a goof. And I feel like when you cast a big name, that's something that is in the back of your mind. With the dichotomy between Dreamfinder and Figment, they're both warm characters, but they represent two different parts of inspiration, of imagination. Figment is kind of more like vivid colors and language and like all of these different concepts, and then Dreamfinder is like, well, what about science? And there's like all of these different layers. It's like mathematics versus English, like the two different parts of the brain almost. And I feel like that's something that is currently missing from what we have, and I think that that's really important. Whenever you have main characters leading any sort of story or show, you need to have that type of dichotomy. You need, Figment represents the child in all of us.
Well, there's no there's no relationship between Dr. Channing and Figment, because this is one of our discoveries. It wasn't, when it comes to Figment and Dreamfinder, because it was something that Dreamfinder imagined, there's a piece of Dreamfinder in there, and it seems like all of the stuff that as an adult we don't necessarily pay attention to anymore. and so they have an instant relationship. This is something that I created. In all intents and purposes, this is my child. and so one of my favorite clips is from of the walk around Dreamfinder was in the Christmas special where say goodbye, Figment, and he goes goodbye, Figment, and Dreamfinder erupts in this just pure cacophonous silly chortle of a laugh that's just so pure and so real. It's like he was setting like that's a laugh that you have with some of your best friends. That's an uninhibited laugh. That's something that is so real and so like so legitimate. It's something that we can all relate to. So when you take that relationship away, Figment's actions don't mean as much because he's doing them. It seems like he's doing them more selfishly as opposed to something to actually try and help.
Well, and that's the other thing too. As of right now, the way Figment behaves in his attraction is kind of perplexing, not quite consistent with the original image. The fact that he skunks everybody, and I mean, sure, it's the lottery, but it's still, come on, Figment, you didn't have to land on the skunk. You chose to land on the skunk. And it's just a little bit of a menace. And the entire time, Nigel Channing is looking embarrassed and sorry, and he's like, I can't control this thing, and he's like embarrassed and almost ashamed.
Well,
and
because
that's almost like saying then to like, hey, you can't let your imagination run wild because like look at the damage it causes,
and then
that's hurtful.
But then it reverses on that at the very end.
Well, sure.
So, the message.
But then you
the message is
go
inconsistent.
through his house.
The message is inconsistent, and so
why does Figment have a house? Does an imaginary dragon need a house?
He did for that purpose.
I guess so.
He imagined that house, but ultimately, that's one of the main takeaways. I think is the message is way too inconsistent, and so you can never really get invested. I think a really easy upgrade that they could have made was make the lottery a lottery as opposed to just having it be a skunk, or have it land on the skunk but put something like, have you ever thought of what a skunk would smell like if it smelled good? And then
I mean, people always say, oh, a skunk could smell like roses, for example. Like, it could be, or cotton candy.
Make an imaginative smell that's a combination of all these things, so people then go, what is that? And then it's less of a, like, I was covering my nose just because I knew what was coming up when we were on it, and I just didn't want to deal with it. And you don't, if it's a ride that's supposed to be fun, you don't want repeat, like, there could be people that never go on it again because they didn't like the skunk part.
Yeah.
And how much of an assault that was. You know, I didn't consent to this. So if you change it up and give the surprise element there, and it's so easy, especially if you mix a bunch of really positive smells. It doesn't matter necessarily the percentage of this, that, and the other thing that comes through, because then that makes it different every time. Then it's like, oh, I'm smelling more cotton candy this time.
So I want to ask you if they, or I'm going to say when they do update it, because they will, because we know that that's on the table. We've gotten all these hints that it's going to be announced. What do you actually want to see? Do you just want to see them do a new layover of what's there? Do you want to see them rip it out and start from scratch? Do you want to see them try to revive some of the old track?
So I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I don't want the same exact thing. I want an evolution, but what I don't want is any activity. I want the building to close. But I want the building to close. I don't want there to be construction. I mean, there probably legally have to be construction walls, but I just sort of like when the Haunted Mansion, the mansion was built and nothing happened for a while. I want the pavilion to be there, and you'd notice nothing throughout. And they're using back entrances. They're using they're keeping everything legitimacy. I don't want them to tear down anything. If they repaint some stuff, cool. If they reuse some outside space, cool. Get rid of the theater, like that. The Pixar Shorts theater. Like, personally, I understand why that's there, 100%. And now living in Florida, having as many places to duck out, especially in a corner where there's no like in or out. That's another thing. I would want like a back, like just some sort of loop back to Future World instead of just keeping
with
it
In-N-Out Burger.
Something.
I'd like to see them turn that actually into the new shopping space.
Sure, great.
Then it's bigger. You can sell more Figment stuff there, and then Dreamfinder stuff there too.
But yeah, you utilize all of the space that you could possibly use, but I don't want to see the activity. Maybe at the very last sort of months where they're finally repainting and reworking, that's when we finally start to see stuff. But if something that I would really want is really close to opening, near the top, they have a prop, a cutout of this or that of the Dreamfinder's vehicle, like near the top, and then people go, "Oh, it's real," and it's like, "Oh, something's happening," because they people talk about, and I mentioned the Disneyland Paris, how there's a whole story in Frontierland, and every little thing is connected, and when it comes to Epcot, bringing a little bit of that back, I think, is what people are looking forward to, is something that people definitely want, and seeing some sort of an indicator that something is happening without a sign that says, hey, something's happening. But because then if it's just a vehicle that's on top of a glass pyramid, people who know and freak out, and then the people who don't know are wondering why people are freaking out, and they start asking questions, and then there's this murmur, there's this rumble. It's not then you naturally get a social media campaign. It's not a hashtag Dreamfinders back that Disney releases, and they're like, oh, we found a top hat in Future World in the Land Pavilion. What does that mean? Like, no, it's none of that stuff. It's so simple. It's so easy. You make a lightweight thing that you can't quite tell like what it's made, like, as if it's far away enough, you can make it look however you want. But if the basic outline is there and it doesn't have like lights on it at night, so you have to be there during the day, or maybe it would probably cost a lot to do temporarily, but like you put it on one day but you don't put it on the next day, maybe put it on the week later. But I'm in blue
yeah
sky. But I ultimately take as much space as you need, evolve the concept. I would love to see Channing return, but I don't want to see any activity until the very, very last couple of months. That's what I would like.
Okay. What I want to see them do, if they need to get the second floor up to code, like you said, close the entire pavilion. Like I said, turn the former Magic Eye Theater into gift shops. People can go shopping in the meantime. They can do that right away.
It's the Pixar Short Film Festival right now.
And I mean, that's great. We all like to be able to get in and have a break. The thing is, having all of these former 3D attraction spaces, 4D attraction spaces of movies has become tired, outdated. It's time to do something a little more imaginative. Like, it's not like we can go see a 3D movie so easily that it's just not that exciting anymore to the public. And I want to see the second floor come back fully as ImageWorks, and I want to fully expand even more on the sensory experience. I want to see, for example, during Food and Wine Festival, I would love for there to be a space where there's all these different herbs and spices and such, and people can come there and they can mix different things together and create their own spice rub or something, and try different things out, different tastes, different smells. Maybe they can even create their own perfume. There's another thing you could sell if you wanted to. But then also, once everything is done at the Odyssey and once everything is able to come back, fresh Rainbow Tunnel back in there, different interactive experiences, the Philharmonic, because that's a lot of fun. There are all of these different interactive things that they continue to entertain people, and technology only gets better and better with how it's implemented and how you can do it. And I'd like to see the spirit of that come back. There should definitely be some sort of a coloring area in a really creative, technological way. I'd love to see all of that. As for the attraction, I think I'd like to see a trackless ride system. That way they're not stressing about the turntable breaking down, because I know that was a big problem for them back in the day. Because Kodak didn't want expensive maintenance costs either. And that's why it was reduced to as much as it was. They basically told Imagineering, yeah, we don't want to keep paying for this breaking down, so make it as cheap to maintain as possible. We know that that's no good. It needs to have the original heart that the original one did. I do want to see new technology and different things, but I want to see the arts represented. I want to see science and technology again, and all of these different concepts. And I like the idea of it still in some ways relating to the senses, but like taste and touch, for example, is hard to do in terms of a ride, because you have to sit in the vehicle so you're not hurting yourselves. So I think that might be more beneficial to have upstairs in ImageWorks than actually in the ride itself. So I think that the original concept of what inspires all of the things that we humans see and do and experience and create, how we see that in terms of creation, that is what the ride should be.
Here's an idea that I think will take a little bit. It may not. People may not like this. Make Journey into Imagination Epcot's version of It's a Small World.
What do you mean by that?
In the sense where, now when you said it's hard to visualize taste and smell, you know what visualize taste very well? Ratatouille. Where Ego eats the ratatouille and is immediately transported back. And even though we weren't tasting that, we felt that. We knew that. We understood exactly what that was. So, Chapek gets his way, and you get a film representation. It's not exclusively that. Like, I'm
hating this.
No, I know. But here's something that could happen. So, I'm not saying that it's exclusively, hey, let's see how imaginative all of these Disney franchises are. It's check out all of this imagination like they did here. Check out all of this, all of the smell, the sight of this, the smell of this, that, and they explore. And then like in the corner you see like a wave of seawater hitting a pirate ship, and it implies, and it's not necessarily overtly, this is Peter Pan, or this is Pirates of the Caribbean, but you see the Black Pearl, or you see with taste, you see this, you see that, you see Remy's Ratatouille. It's not overt, it's subversive, to where you can then be reminded of how you felt in those experiences, to where you can still then sell the Ratatouille merch, the Pirates merch, the Peter Pan merch. You still get your little bit of Disney in there, but it's not taken over, and it's still a journey through the senses.
I'm going to stay by what I said before, and I wanted to. No. Yeah. I know. Hey, it's cool. I'm just saying, if we're gonna have the senses, all of the senses should be explored in the same area. And I don't think that a ride itself makes sense for them to do it. I think it was great that they tried, but also there's a very obvious reason why you miss out on two of the senses. it's easy enough to say, oh, well, yeah, Figment just skunked you. I don't want to see him hurt you even more. And also, I don't want to see Figment as a menace anymore. Everybody loves him. Everyone buys his merch. He is adorable. He is a cute little dragon. Let him be the cute, childish little dragon he's always meant to be, who he was designed to be. Bring back Dreamfinder. Bring back the walk-around Dreamfinder and Figment, because that was magical. People love them. They are the unofficial mascots of EPCOT, and they deserve to be celebrated and treated as such.
So you've got the vehicle that lands on the top of the pyramids that clues people back in a couple months ahead. Mm-hmm. You reuse that as the photo location. Yeah. Boom. There, you get longevity out of a prop.
Well, when you were first talking about it, I was like, oh, he's meaning this as a photo op location. And then when you said on top of the pyramid, I was like, wait, what?
No, like he's been on a journey for 20 years trying to collect, because it's a lot harder to collect the sparks these days. So he that's why he hasn't been around. Oh, but there's this big return because he found something, and so so he found his own spark in trying to search for everybody else's. He loses his, but he ends up finding it, and it's an adorable thing that makes adults cry and kids cry and blah blah blah, all that stuff, and really pushes the idea of imagination. I really like the idea of, if we're going to do the census, just get it one and done, get them out of here.
Well, no, I want them all explored. Like, don't do like a third of them or 3/4. Like it well, I guess that literally can't be 3/4, but you know what I mean. It has to be all of them if you're going to talk about them. And most importantly, like if you want to do like secret sly little nods to IPs, like maybe I think that would become tricky. I think more like a hidden Mickey style thing will be the way to go. It's going to be problematic if somebody from higher up goes, yeah, slip in Inside Out. And I'm going to say this again, Inside Out does not belong in the Imagination Pavilion, because emotions and the human mind that concept was inspired by Cranium Command, and there's a reason why. That's not the same thing as imagination. There's a part of Riley's imagination that you see in Inside Out. And by the way, fascinating little thing. And of course, there is the little hidden Figment painting that is in Imagination Land. Really cool. But I don't think that an Inside Out attraction belongs there.
But what would you say to saying Bing Bong?
Bing Bong can go wherever he wants.
Damn right he can. But that's so something.
Yeah.
But no, Journey into Your Emotionation doesn't sound right.
Yeah. And ultimately, whatever this new attraction becomes, I think that it's important that the flight into imagination, the very beginning of the original Journey into Imagination, was key in setting up the rest of the ride. And losing that spirit and that essence of like talking about imagination, where it comes from, and inspiring it in you. You know, it's one thing to look at other characters experiencing it, but the key to going on a ride is you are experiencing it. You should be experiencing that. You should be experiencing imagination and letting it fly through your journey into imagination. So that's key to making it work, and key to keeping the heart of the message of it. So as long as the pavilion stays true to those ideas of inspiring imagination in everyone that goes there, and taking the creative route, and not, we're going to tell you what imagination is and just read it off like a bunch of points a bunch of bullet points, I think that it will be a success. So that is what I am hoping to see. I'd love to hear what the rest of you, our listeners out there, would like to see happen to the Imagination Pavilion, what your thoughts are on everything. If you agree, if you disagree, if you've got some other creative ideas of your own, please make sure to tweet at us. You can find me as Dole Whip Drea, and you can find Mark.
You can find me at Mark Bidonica on Twitter, Instagram. Follow us on Twitter at Party of 2Pod. If you're listening to us on your podcast service of choice and you want to help support our addiction, frankly, go to anchor.fm/Party of 2Pod. There's a place where you can donate and help support us financially. We don't need it. We would really appreciate it. We're good. Thank you. Letting you know that is available if you want to help support the show, get fresher graphics, etc., etc. It helps for the incidentals, I'll tell you what. But follow us, share us with your friends, and respond to all of our calls and stuff, because we like having a conversation with everybody. We really appreciate everybody that has been listening so far, and everybody who may be listening ever.
So until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.